So this video is about Kiss albums and ranking from worst to best. Now they do have 27 albums because we've included every album that has a studio track on it. My son and I watched a video about the worst Kiss albums to the best Kiss albums, and we kind of thought about doing it ourselves. My son, all by himself, got into Kiss, and I've been a big Kiss fan for years. So the way we looked at it was more methodical and mathematical. So we started by listening to every single Kiss album, including the solo albums, the studio albums from Alive 2, and the fresh tracks from Killers, and we basically marked off how many total tracks were on the album and how many of the songs we liked on the album or that we thought had some kind of merit to it. By that, we came up with a percentage which was applied to each album, and we've been able to rank them from 27th all the way down to 1st. Now, I will give you a delta because the top 10 was all 90 to 100%. So it came down more to which album we liked the best in the case of its vibe versus the number of good songs versus its consistency. Number 27. Gene Simmons' solo album. Gene Simmons is a great guy, and we love a lot of the contributions he's made to Kiss, but this album didn't quite do it for us. There was really only one song that we liked, which was Radioactive, which gave it a 1 out of 11 for a total of 9.1%. The only real reason that the other albums beat it was because there were more songs on Gene's than the other two, with the exception of The Elder, which is our number 26 spot, The Elder. It was a great idea. We've since re-listened to it in the order the tracks were supposed to be in, and it made a little bit more sense, but still the piano and the orchestra were very distracting, and it wasn't really the kind of thing that we were digging. So we liked 2 out of the 12 tracks, which gave it a score of 16.7%. Moving into number 25, the Peter Criss solo album. Now, the only reason that the Peter Criss solo album beat out Gene's on this list, as I was mentioning, is because it had less songs, and we actually dug 2 of the songs as opposed to 1. So with a 2 out of 10 score, it gave us 20%. Much too 1950s for our style, and it seemed like too much of a departure. Number 24, Unmasked. Although there were some really catchy songs on Unmasked that got stuck in our head for hours, there was really only 3 that we really got into. We found that on the whole there was way too much synth, so with 3 out of 11 tracks that gave it a score of 27.3%. At number 23, Carnival of Souls. Carnival of Souls had some good tracks on it, but on the whole it was just too grungy, and with a score of 5 out of 12, it gave us 41.7% and placed it at the spot which it's in. Number 22, Sonic Boom. Really weird album for us. It was kind of all over the place. Unlike its predecessors of Carnival of Souls and Circus and its follow-up of Monster, it was really not consistent at all. It did have some great songs on it, but if we had to rank it bad for something, it definitely got a minus point for the creepy voice that Tommy was giving while he was attempting to sing his song. So with a score of 5 out of 11, it gives us 45.5%. Number 21. Hot in the Shade. I really liked the Hot in the Shade album on the whole, but there's a lot of filler. It is a really long album. In fact, it is the longest studio album of Kiss's that is not a compilation album. At 15 tracks, it is massive, and it has a lot of filler songs on it. So we liked 7 songs, and if this had been a standard Kiss album with 10 or 11 songs, that would have ranked it much higher on the list. But because of all of those extra filler songs, it got a score of 7 out of 15, or 46.7%. At number 20. Now, we had to downgrade this album a bit, mainly because it wasn't released in the US, and that was Killers. There were 4 fresh tracks on it. We liked 2 of them, so it got a score of 50%. Because of this, we downgraded it from number 19, Circus, where there was 10 tracks. We also liked 5 of them, which also gave it a score of 50%. On the whole, Circus was really 90s sounding, not quite as grunge as Carnival of Souls, but still, considering that the album before it was Revenge, Circus was a far cry of what it could have or should have been. At number 18, again, an album that I kind of liked, which was Crazy Nights. We had 7 out of 11 songs that we really liked on it. There were a lot of keyboards, and a lot of bands suffered from this in the 80s, and Kiss especially were some of its victims, where I've personally found the guitar sound really thin, with the exception of the Bruce Kulick solos, where there was a very fat, very present lead tone. I found the rhythms were very tinny and thin sounding. Crazy Nights got a score of 7 out of 11 for 63.6%. Number 17, Monster. Now, Monster was much better than Sonic Boom in many ways. However, you could tell even in Sonic Boom and in Monster, this is when Paul was really starting to have some vocal issues, and the songs just weren't quite the same as they were in the past. We did like 8 out of the 12 songs, which gave it a score of 66.7%. Moving into number 16, Dressed to Kill, the first of the original albums. Now, there were 7 out of the 10 tracks that were quite good on this, but on the whole, it was a very weak album, we thought, compared to the other 2 that came before it. Now, of course, there are some seminal tracks on it, like She, Rock and Roll All Night, and Rock Bottom. Rock Bottom, one of my personal favorite Kiss songs. However, there were just so many other better albums than this. 7 out of 10, of course, gives it a score of 70%. There are 2 other albums that also scored 70% at 7 out of 10, and we ranked Dressed to Kill the lowest, again, based on the vibe of the other albums, or how the other albums stacked up to the others from that era, which gives us number 15, Asylum. Asylum is a really good album and is often forgotten, and with the exception of the Peter Criss solo album, has actually sold the least out of all Kiss albums. Now, if there was any Kiss album that you haven't heard and you kind of wanted to see something different, it is a really solid album, and I do recommend checking it out. But we had to give the better score out of the 3 that were tied at 70% to Rock and Roll Over. Rock and Roll Over is a great album. If you look at the time it came out, it was an immediate follow-up to Destroyer, and that follow-up had to be huge. It was a year or so before Love Gun came out, and it didn't skip a beat. Very similar to how Hotter Than Hell was an incredible follow-up to the original Kiss album, Rock and Roll Over was absolutely amazing when it came to the follow-up for Destroyer. At number 13, with a score of 4 out of 5, we have Alive 2. Now, Alive 2 gets skipped on a lot of these lists because it's a live album. However, if you look at the actual second disc of the album, there are 5 really good tracks. 4 of them we really liked. Any Way You Want It, we kind of could have lived without. So it got a score of 4 out of 5, or 80%. Coming in at number 12, the Paul Stanley solo album. Now again, unlike the other solo albums, Paul Stanley's and Ace Frehley's were short. They both only had 9 songs on them, which made the percentages a lot higher. It also had a writing style that was much more accustomed to what we're used to, and we dug 8 out of the 9 tracks on it for a score of 88.9%. Now, also with a score of 88.9%, or 8 out of 9, we did rank it 1 higher because it was an actual Kiss album as opposed to a solo album, and that was Animalize. We all wish we could have seen Mark St. John live, but with the follies that happened with Vinnie Vincent, maybe it was best, and when I got into Kiss, Bruce Kulick was their guitar player, so Bruce was my favorite hands down. Moving into number 10. Lick It Up. With a score of 9 out of 10, this album may have been by far the best non-makeup album. With its production value and the quality of songs, it is clearly the best album before Revenge. It also had some very, very interesting arrangements. Number 9. Kiss, the original album. Also with a score of 9 out of 10 for 90%. It did rank a little higher because it was the first album and it had the original lineup and it had a lot of very good songs on it. So this is where we get into murky waters, where the scores are pretty much 100%, with the exception of 2 albums that there was only really 1 song we didn't like on it, but the album was so good we kind of trumped it up a little bit higher. So coming up, the controversial number 8 spot on our list and the first 100% score, Dynasty. If you can get over the disco feel of I Was Made for Loving You, and you can actually listen to the songs and the production, it is a really good album and worth taking a second listen to. Number 7, Smashes, Thrashes, and Hits, had 3 original songs. Technically only 2 of them were original, but we also count the Eric Carr version of Beth as being a 3rd original song on it. All those 3 songs were brilliant. Let's Put the X in Sex, You Make Me Rock Hard, and the Eric Carr version of Beth. And there's also a few other tweaked and remastered versions of some classic Kiss songs. So if you're looking for a greatest hits Kiss album, we definitely recommend 1988's Smashes, Thrashes, and Hits. Coming in at number 6, Creatures of the Night. The best album out of the 80s, hands down for Kiss. Tones were great, production value was great. Even though Ace was on the original cover and didn't play on it, there was some amazing songs on it. Moving into the number 5 spot, and the first to be at 90 and elevated, Love Gun. Love Gun is the seminal Kiss album. It is the step 2 of Destroyer. You can't think of 1970s Kiss, especially the Alive 2 era, without Love Gun and Destroyer. They go hands in hands, and it is more than earned its number 5 spot on the list. Number 4, we had to give to Revenge. Revenge just blew away every single album that came after 1983's Lick It Up in a way that the other albums just couldn't stand up to. The production value was amazing from Bob Ezrin. The tone of the guitars were much more hardened and thick, and we actually got real Gene involvement, which we hadn't got in many, many years. A lot of people think Revenge is overrated because so many people love it. It is actually one of their highest selling albums, other than Destroyer and Smashes, Thrashes, and Hits. It's just very, very good. You've got to listen to it. And now for the top 3, which you can probably guess if you've been keeping track. All these 3 rang in at 100%. Revenge, of course, was 91.7, and Love Gun 90. Number 3, because again, solo album, we had to give it to the Ace Frehley solo album. We're all Ace fans, we love Ace's solo album. It probably would have been so much better if we had picked and chosen the different songs from the Paul, Peter, and Gene solo album and just had one album. It would have been absolutely brilliant. Number 2, at 100% score, Hotter Than Hell. Probably my favorite of the Kiss makeup albums because it has so many good songs on it and because it was popped out so quick because the original album didn't do as well as they thought it was going to. And of course, at number 1, who could think of any other Kiss album other than Destroyer? Destroyer is the quintessential Kiss album. If you're only going to have one Kiss album in your collection and you don't want it to be a greatest hits album, get Destroyer, then get Hotter Than Hell, then pick up Revenge and the Ace Frehley album and Love Gun, and then move on through the rest of our list. We hope you've enjoyed this list. This is our first attempt at making a video, so like, subscribe, and share as you see fit.